Hello there, everybody. Oh, hello, everybody. Uh, I'm Reverend Gina Pond, and I'm welcoming you to our midweek online service. And thank you for being here. And sorry about the technical difficulties from yesterday. We were having trouble going live. Oh, and it was kind of a day. So hopefully you'll forgive me for missing a day. So welcome. We are the Between the Worlds Waking Christian Church, and Between the Worlds Church is intentionally radically inclusive, and we welcome all persons of any race, color, age, ancestry, sexual or relationship orientation, body size, gender, religion, or any other difference. We respect each other and remember that all of our beliefs are equally valid in the eyes of Spirit. We love all the deities that are represented in our virtual congregation, and we include Jesus in our spiritual practice, however he may come to us. Spirits of the east, of air, may we always gain new knowledge and the resources to recognize our truth. Spirits of the south, of fire, may we always call on your passion to drive us and to do the work that Spirit has called us to do. Spirits of the west, of water, may we always remember to acknowledge the feelings of others and find our compassion. Spirits of the north, of earth, may we always remember that no matter who we are part of the earth, and that we are made from earth and will go back to earth. And spirits of the center, that which we are, may we always hold each other up through the bad and the good in any way we are called and able to serve. Sorry. All right. I call in Jesus for us to show and to find and to heal, to show us the way, to find our compassion, and to heal from all the wrongs that have been done to us. And I call on the ancestors, our personal ancestors, our collective ancestors, that they may help us find a way to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past. So if you would like prayers said for you, or if you have permission from others to have prayers said for them, you can post them in the chat. And I need to turn off my phone. Oops, sorry, guys. If you have a prayer request that you would like the community to pray for you for anything, you can also put it in the chat later if you are watching this later. And this week I am praying for my father-in-law who had a stroke and could use all the good vibes that he could get, good healing vibes. I'm also praying for my parents as we move forward with them in a new journey for them in their retirement. I also pray for the U.S. to help it learn better. And for us as Americans, wherever we are, to learn better and to learn more compassion and love for one another. And let's have a moment of silence for any other silent prayers you want to say. Spirits of the universe, please hear our prayers and help us to find ways to do your work in the world that will help us fulfill our needs. Okay. So today's I'm not really have a Bible scripture, but I do have a quote from Khalil Gibran from the Prophet, and that is one of my all-time favorite books. I have several copies of it digitally and physically, including a very nice copy that my mom gave me, which I really adore. And the quote today is, "Whenever you pass by the field where you have laid your ancestors, look well thereupon, and you shall see yourselves and your children dancing hand in hand." So I'm going to admit here, I have a very unpopular opinion about September 11th. Normally, I wouldn't tell somebody how to grieve, how to do their grief, but the United States collectively needs to move on from September 11th. And before you get yelling at me about whatever, about people dealing with grief and how they deal with September 11th, just hear me out for a minute. So when those we love die and pass on, we grieve, right? And for a long time, it's really intense and very present and very right in front of our faces. And then slowly, as time goes by, it gets less so. I mean, it's not that there's not pain there, there's not grief there, but, and we might cry a bit or be sad on the anniversaries or on anniversaries or their birthdays or anything like that. But it just gets more bearable as time goes on. And it's not that we don't cry, it's not that we don't feel pain or when we're reminded on these anniversaries, but you can live the rest of your days without that real intense grief, without it being so present and right in front of your face, like it was in the immediate time after someone's death. And, we move forward with our lives, colors become real again, we find little things that give you joy again. We see things that, and then after several years, you can see things that remind you of your beloved person. And instead of them being painful, you start thinking of happy memories with them. Like with my grandparents, like the first few years, especially, were really hard to think of them because they were gone. But like now it's like, there's little things that remind me of them. Like, yellow roses always remind me of MMA, and every time I barbecue, it reminds me of my grandfather, or if I see like woodwork being done or anything like that, or like if I smell pipe smoke, that kind of thing. And it's stuff that makes me remember them fondly and remember the time I had with them, but it's not painful anymore. We remember, we start remembering what they did during their lives instead of reliving their deaths. And I think that's the big thing here, because in regards to 9/11, Americans have not done that. We're still reliving those deaths. We don't look, to take from the quote, we don't look well upon where our ancestors from 9/11 lay. Instead of letting go, we've held on with tooth and nail. Instead of letting the grief fade to a dull ache, we keep it fresh. And, I could lay all the blame at the media or politicians for stoking the grief fresh every year. And they do have a role to play. Don't get me wrong. They absolutely do. But we also have free will here. And we can choose not to participate in the yearly grief porn. And I use porn on purpose here, because it's pornography in the sense that the videos of the planes hitting the towers are trotted out every year to make sure that we are all emotionally pushed again and again and again. And it keeps tearing open those wounds, like it's like a scab, right? And instead of the scab becoming a scar, we tear it off again. We tear it off again. And, there's a reason why we get scars. There's a reason why scabs turn into scars, right? It's, it reminds us of something that we did. Like, I burn my hand in the iron. I get a scar for a while, and that makes me go, oh, shit, I shouldn't have done that. Right? But instead of our collective memory becoming a scar that we've learned from, it became a media spectacle and a political rallying tool. It's something that just keeps getting flicked open every year, and we haven't moved on from it. And to tell you the truth, we need to, no, we must move on from 9/11. We need to find our collective hope and joy again. The American spirit is suffering, and I think part of what we're seeing now in society, not just in America, especially American society, not just politically, but interactions between people, is partly a result of not being able to let go of that, right? We're all tense and we're all jacked up because we've harmed our spirits and our emotional health by not letting go of this. We've now made it, it's now become a part of our cultural thing where you must be jacked up about 9/11 or you're not a true patriot. And that's emotionally damaging. We keep picking at that scab and we're not letting it heal. I mean, and the thing is, and I'm not saying at all that we need to forget 9/11. I'm not saying that we have to forget what happened or anything of that. On the contrary, we can't forget it, and we won't forget it, obviously, because it's a major trauma, right? But it's been 17 years since 9/11. 17 years. And instead of just being a footnote in the news, a reverent note in the news where you see, the president or some other political figure laying a wreath at the memorial site in New York City, the event gets relived every year. Videos get trotted out, and they're played over and over and over and over again for the full 24 hours. And it's, and we're adding trauma, we're adding to our own trauma. And we need to stop letting ourselves be dragged into this grief porn year after year. We need to demand that media stop doing that. We need to shame politicians that use 9/11 as a whip and a flogger to keep us in line. And we also need to ask our politicians not to use it as a political crutch. But collectively, we also need to let it go. We need to let our grief do what it's supposed to do naturally, become a dull ache and a scar that lets us remember. And not only for ourselves, not only for those who lived through it, but there are kids who are getting traumatized from it every 9/11 who weren't even born yet. And I learned that there's scientific research that children of survivors of trauma get a fraction of that trauma themselves just by hearing about it and knowing about it and hearing the stories from people. So, and they will suffer some of the effects of that trauma and have some of the emotional health issues that go along with it, especially if a parent or a loved one hasn't let the grief process do its normal process, where you get to a point where it's a dull ache, you remember it, and you remember where you were or whatever, but it's not immediately present. And so we're giving kids who weren't even born yet that wound. We're making them relive things that they weren't even there for, and that they shouldn't be reliving with us. And they're being manipulated by people around something they weren't there for. And in my mind, that's not fair. So I know for a lot of people, this is not going to be a very popular opinion. But I know for me, I choose to take a social media fast every year on 9/11. I don't post anything about it. I mean, because I remember that day quite clearly. I remember how I felt because I was living in the Boston area where the hijackers left from. I remember how creepy it was when there were no planes flying, and I remember all that. But I choose to move on. I choose to not participate in the death porn. And I really resent, and I try to vote out. So if you're not registered to vote, you should be. politicians using that grief and the graves of our ancestors there to whip up fear and paranoia. And I say prayers to the ancestors created on 9/11 that eventually they may be able to finally know peace because we finally have moved forward. Because as a spirit worker, if you keep, the way I see it, if you keep opening fresh wounds like that, they keep getting pulled back here and don't have a chance to rest. And hopefully we can move on instead of keeping them stuck in those final hours. So think about it and think about your choice around September 11th every year. Gods, goddesses, spirits, may we Americans find the collective will to finally allow the ancestors from 9/11 their proper place in the universe. May we find ways to stop opening the wounds of 9/11, and may we find ways to learn from and heal those wounds. May we find ourselves on the path to respecting our ancestors from that time and not letting their graves be robbed by fear and greed. In your many names, may it be so. Amen. I'd like to thank Jesus and the ancestors. I'd like to thank the spirits of earth, water, fire, and air. And I especially want to thank all of you for joining me in these services, whether you join me live or you join me later. And also, we may be moving the time again. Hopefully that'll settle down because our internet gets a little wonky in the evenings. So anyway, I will keep you posted about that. And may you have a great week, and I'll see you next time.